In the next hour, Newzroom Afrika will take you to the world's longest man-made structure, the Great Wall of China, which receives more than 10 million visitors a year, and take you to where some of the Chinese emperors who built the wall actually lived, the Forbidden City, a palace consisting of thousands of rooms. We take a look at the uneven trade relationship between the world's second biggest economy and 53 of Africa's 54 countries who import far less than they export with China. We then speak to the first black owner of a wine farm in South Africa's most popular wine route, the upmarket Franschhoek in the Western Cape, about how the trip with President Cyril Ramaphosa's business delegation to the state visit in China transformed his brand. But first, we take you to one of the most phenomenal wonders of the world, a World Heritage Site that some list as one of the most expensive single pieces of real estate in the world. This area is just one part of the palace, a city in fact, and when you are inside it, it goes on and on and on, one building after another, totaling 980 buildings.
How many rooms?
3,000.
3,000. More.
Huh?
More than 3,000.
Okay, nice round number, 5,000.
5,000. More.
This Forbidden City had 9,000 or has 9,999 rooms because the emperor believed that the gods, the daughter of the gods, lived in 10,000 rooms. If you came in here and you were forbidden to come in here, you were simply killed. The number 9 was only used by the emperor, and all the other numbers you could have, nobody else could use. Let's see some more. And if you go through the tour too fast, you will almost miss the inner Golden Water River, which winds and flows to the various palaces and acts as a drainage system. And it was also designed to be a fire pool to fight fire in case of emergencies. In the Forbidden City, the ancient emperor's homestead, and he also had many wives. Very interesting, very. Nestled in the heart of Beijing, the Forbidden City is the most visited tourist attraction in the world, clocking more than 40,000 visitors per day, and has constantly received on average 16 million visitors per year. By comparison, South Africa receives only 6 million visitors a year, but most of the city's visitors are local tourists, mostly retired Chinese people from the rural areas across the country. Commissioned in the year 1406 by the Yongle Emperor of the Ming dynasty, and after 14 years and 1 million workers, it was completed in 1420 and still stands as a symbol of China's architectural heritage 600 years later. It is the world's largest palace, covering 74 hectares of land, big enough to fit 140 soccer fields. Before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, as many as 80,000 visitors were allowed each day to enter the Forbidden Palace.
The door knocks 9 and a 9, symbolizing his power. Other people, if you use number 9, you kill.
As a visitor, this palace will certainly make you feel small. With its monstrous meridian gate, high walls, ornate floors, halls, garden and library, all the while barely scratching the surface of the mysteries and stories behind the thousands of artworks adorning the city, while milling amongst the crowds. There is so much to see that it would take days to get through every corner of the palace. It will set you back anything between 200 rands and 700 rands for a tour of 4 hours, depending which parts of the city you want to visit. Private day tours, which include Tiananmen Square, the Forbidden City, cost anything between 2,000 rands and 3,500 rands. The Forbidden City's Imperial Garden is another popular attraction, stretching 12,000 square meters. It was used for relaxation, reading, and to perform sacrificial rites by the emperor's wives and concubines. Inside, some of the rooms are teeming with tourists, as a few of the structures have been turned into souvenir shops which sell collectibles. For a price comparison, a 500 milliliter bottle of Coke in China will set you back 5 yuan, which is equivalent to about 13 South African rand, the same price it costs South Africa's 440 milliliter Coca-Cola bottle. Our next stop is the Great Wall of China, another wonder of the world, parts of which can be seen from out of space. Both the wall and the Forbidden City are located in China's capital of Beijing, a city of 22 million people. Almost every corner of the city has surveillance cameras. And according to the Safe City Index, Beijing is in the top 10 of the safest cities in Asia. And Katie Melua was right. There are more than 9 million bicycles in Beijing, and everyone prefers them as a mode of transport. It's a thriving metropolis with modern electric taxis and buses, and locals who prefer taking bicycles to get around. From teenagers to pensioners, bicycles are also a key feature to keeping a healthy exercise regime. And for many, they pay a small price to go from one end of the city to the next, using applications on their phones to use the electric bicycle, which is powered by the amount of times the rider pedals. Such has the popularity of the electric bicycles taken over China, where locals can ride bicycles for up to 6 hours per day, that 2 Chinese cities imposed a temporary ban on riding bicycles at night, as they caused a traffic congestion for other road users. But you haven't visited China until you've been to the Great Wall, by far the most famous landmark in all of Asia. The Great Wall of China, built 600 years ago, is 3,500 kilometers that displays the People's Republic of China's prowess in construction. Today, cities like Shanghai and Beijing stand as monuments because partly of this wall. The Ming Dynasty decided to build this wall to keep out Genghis Khan from Mongolia, and today the local economy is benefiting from it. By the time the Great Wall was completed, it stood at 21,196 kilometers, of which 8,850 remain well preserved today. For centuries, the Great Wall kept out China's enemies, but eventually the Mongols and the Huns broke through, and it became useless. When the Chinese border moved further north, it ultimately became a tourist attraction. Today, there is still a large Mongol population that still lives in Beijing, integrated with the other ethnic groups who ply their trade here. It is now a resort with accommodation for travelers close by, employing thousands of local people. This has given rise to an estimated 35 million employees in the tourism and travel industry, and more than 10,000 travel agencies. Featuring picturesque views all year round, with the forest covering more than 90% of the wall, like most local attractions, you will need a passport to get through the gates. A minimum of 10 million people visit the Great Wall every year, a popular spot for foreigners. It is so popular among travelers that today only about 370 kilometers of the wall are kept in a stable condition, according to historians and preservationists who monitor the site. This is due to the wall's popularity among visitors. with many locals as recently as October calling for restrictions to the high number of visitors after 100,000 people crammed into what is called the bedarling part of the wall in just one day. As of September, tickets here range from 370 rands for a full-day tour to 1,600 rand for a private tour. It is estimated that between 400,000 and 500,000 people died building this wall, and it is believed many of them are interred within the walls built using rice, lime, and egg. According to official data, international tourists spend close to 470 billion rands while visiting and exploring China's sprawling cities, cultural heritage, and unforgettable natural landscape. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, which almost decimated China's tourism sector, the industry, now in recovery, is expected to surpass 2019 visitor numbers and its contribution to the country's economy within the next couple of years. The latest figures show that in 2023, the total contribution of the travel and tourism industry was 24.5 trillion rands, accounting for 7.3% of China's total GDP. This means that China's travel and tourism sector alone is more than 3 times South Africa's economy. But for travelers who want a lazy experience, the Olympic Forest Park in Beijing is another architectural landmark which is a great picnic area. It is the largest public green space ever built in Beijing. Constructed during the 2008 Summer Olympics, which are still considered to be the best Olympics of all time, the man-made park is 680 hectares in size with more than 2 million plants brought here in an area that can fit at least 700 soccer fields. It's easy to see why thousands of people frequent this park daily for lazying around and practicing the ancient martial art of Tai Chi for exercise and self-defense techniques. Many of these elderly Chinese citizens also enjoy the benefits of the world's biggest social security program. While this may be a good thing for social security, on the other hand, China has the problem of having one of the oldest populations in the world. A Reuters report says Chinese citizens get their pension once they retire at age 60 for men, 55 for white-collar women, and 50 for women who work in factories. More than 20% of China's 1.4 billion people are over 60 years old, with about 1 billion people paying into or receiving payments from its national basic pension as at the end of 2022. The average monthly pension payment in China in 2020 was around 500 rand, according to the UN's International Labour Organization. Up next, we take a closer look into why China is looking to expand in Africa, even as its lending to African countries has decreased, and what the over 50 high-level African leaders, including 36 presidents and prime ministers, want to gain for their countries' relationships with China at the 9th Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. The People's Republic of China, also known as the Red Dragon, has also been given the moniker of the factory of the world due to its ability for running factories at a fraction of the cost of the global average. China's ability to move the majority of its 1.4 billion people out of poverty within a matter of decades continues to be studied by experts around the world. The size of its population is second only to India, which has 1.45 billion people. But unlike India, China's economy is far bigger. A few days before the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, the biggest gathering of African heads of state with a single nation, Arthur Mutambara summed up what many African leaders think about the trade imbalances and the overall relationship African nations have with China.
We must be very clear as Africans as to what we want. What we want as Africans. We talk about win-win. What is the definition of the African win? Ambassador, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired of being exporters of raw materials. We don't want to export raw materials to China. We want to work with you on the continent to do value addition, produce cars on the continent, produce computers on the continent, produce value-added products on the continent for the African market and for export to China, export to Europe, export to the world. The African wants to move up the value chains. We don't want to sell raw copper, raw chrome, raw platinum, raw coal, raw diamonds to China. No, we are not interested in that.
On arrival, our team did not have to go too far to find out just how big China is to the global economy, as the world has also discovered that when there's a slowdown in China's economy, it is felt by the rest of the world. For that, we asked Xolani, a humanoid robot with AI and human-like features, which responds to French, English, and Chinese, just what the economic fuss is all about when it comes to China.
In terms of economy, China has experienced rapid growth over the past few decades, becoming the world's second largest economy. It is a major player in global trade and manufacturing, with a vast network of international partnerships and investments. Moreover, China is at the forefront of technological innovation, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and high-speed rail.
But it is China's growing influence and trade relationship with African nations that not only continues to confound Africans themselves, but the rest of the world. And while Africa may have 54 countries, with the continent's 1.5 billion population slightly higher than China's, the trade between the two is far apart. Of the 53 African nations with economic ties with the Red Dragon, 9 rank China as their biggest export and import trade partner. In 2023, the 9 African countries, all resource-rich nations, accounted for 83% of exports with China, an overwhelming advantage over 36 African countries, according to 2023 trade statistics, where China exports far more to these African countries, creating a trade deficit for almost half of the African continent. Only in 3 countries, Botswana, Mozambique, and Sao Tome and Principe, is China's trade so small that it is negligible. The trade imbalance has also been evident in recent years, with African countries getting a smaller piece of the pie each year. This is despite China portraying the trade as mostly balanced. China's trade surplus against Africa was almost $18 billion in 2019, growing to $64 billion in 2023. This is despite the total trade between China and African countries growing to a record $282 billion in 2023. Due to this unequal trade relationship and Africa's rising debt to China, which jumped by $4.3 billion last year, Africa's statesmen headed to Beijing seeking fairness in trade deals.
President of the People's Republic of China and distinguished foreign leaders.
And with the rise in interest rates, this has heightened concerns about the ability of some African nations to service their debt. This has become a bone of contention also among African leaders who sent a strong message to Beijing for China to open up its market for other manufactured products from Africa. African exports to China remain largely raw materials, minerals, oil and gas, machinery, equipment, and other commodities such as coal. But Beijing sees South Africa as the perfect partner to fulfill China's ambitions in Africa. China hopes South Africa can be the gateway to the rest of the continent on imports such as Chinese vehicles. I asked Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Pak Stau at the meeting of South African and Chinese businesses in Beijing why China is such a lucrative investment and trade destination.
When you're talking about a middle class of 800 million people and growing in China, that's looking for different products and different opportunities, both in terms of tourism, access to South Africa and other destinations. We've got great destinations from a tourism point of view, and the ability to attract the Chinese is on its own an opportunity. The ability to ensure that we're able to showcase our tourism products is an important part. But it's not just on the services side. And I should say, without moving from services, we've got major companies from South Africa that have invested in China. And it's not just the bigger companies. There are very many small companies that have joined the delegation. This is the largest business delegation that South Africa has had that's come into China and said, where are the opportunities? And they found a people that have said, we want to trade with you.
I thank you.
South Africa also continues to be the top destination for Chinese foreign direct investment, while Angola remains the biggest debtor to China. While African companies operating in China have gradually increased over the years, Beijing's corporate expansion in Africa is steamrolling. In recent months, China's BYD, the world's largest producer of electric vehicles, released plans to open factories in Morocco, while Fosun Pharmaceuticals also says it plans to open a production line in Côte d'Ivoire. Chinese car maker, the state-owned Beijing Automotive Industrial Corporation, BAIC, has also set up a plant in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape, which is 35% owned by the Industrial Development Corporation. While it has faced many challenges and produced only 300 vehicles in 5 years due to the stop and start caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, they are confident production will start in earnest. And so we headed out to test one of BAIC's newest models at their headquarters in Beijing. BAIC produces 1.7 million vehicles a year globally, some of them from this plant. China plans to use South Africa as its major launch pad to take over the vehicle market on the continent, something that the US and some European countries have been resisting. One of the major differences between the traditional car brands and Chinese vehicles is that the expensive optional extras come standard in Chinese cars, just like this BAIC BJ60 hybrid SUV. It also comes in a luxurious 7-seater, voice command, and a litany of other trinkets which normally do not come standard in other models. This has sent consumers snapping up Chinese vehicles in South Africa and elsewhere in the world. While this model is yet to hit the road in South Africa, BAIC sales show that the company sold 295 new vehicles in January 2024 in South Africa. That is 2 units more than Honda and 7 cars short of Mazda's total. The BJ60's peers from the competition could cost up to 2 million rands, but this BJ60 is expected to come in at just over R1 million depending on the exchange rate. This is partly the reason there's a fear among the competition about the impact Chinese vehicles is having on car brands that have been in South Africa for decades, from Toyota to Mercedes and Ford. These brands admit the value proposition of these Chinese vehicles and the response of consumers attracted to the prices will require a response from the sector.
Amazing to find a lot of businesses.
Forbes Africa 30 Under 30 entrepreneur Dr. Brad Lindell Singh, the isiZulu-speaking and Chinese fluent CEO of the Alpha and Omega Group, says speaking the local language made things easier to sell over 125 million rands worth of made-in-Africa products in China. He speaks about the experience of being a foreign entrepreneur in Beijing.
I came to China first in 2011 and I studied here and I worked here. But in 2020, I had a huge opportunity whilst being onboarded as a Brand South Africa Play Your Part ambassador. I used my influence in China as well as my ability to speak the Chinese language to teach Chinese people about South African culture, visit South Africa and introduce them to some interesting South African products. Some of those products included rooibos tea, South African herbal medicines, as well as some beauty and skincare products. And so basically in the 2021 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, our team in Hangzhou and in Wenzhou, as well as in Beijing, had a wonderful opportunity by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to conduct a live stream e-commerce campaign, and we did over 100 live stream e-commerce campaigns and sold over 150 million rands worth of FMCG products to the Chinese market.
Climate investment banker and globetrotter Amil Ibrahim, who has addressed other global forums at the UN, COP28 and the G20, says global organizations have a vested interest in blocs such as FOCAC and BRICS.
As we have seen by the additional membership to the BRICS community last year, countries such as China and South Africa are playing very leading roles in actually looking at how other countries across the world are engaging within these spaces. We have now seen the additional membership of countries in the Middle East, which include Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And I think particularly looking at the role of the Middle East between Africa and between China, this will be a key region going forward in looking at where capital will be deployed. So certainly the Middle East currently is engaged in many discussions in relation to economic opportunities that exist here within China, but also across Africa. And I think that forums such as BRICS and indeed FOCAC, which has a global stakeholder representation, indeed go to support that going forward.
In our next segment, we bring you the incredible journey of a young black entrepreneur who was part of President Cyril Ramaphosa's delegation to that state visit to China on the sidelines of FOCAC, and find out from Paul Siguqa how that China trip transformed his brand 2 months later.
If you find yourself in the Western Cape here in Franschhoek, and perhaps you need a place to rest, a place to eat and have a little bit to drink, perhaps you should try Kleingoederust here in Franschhoek. This is a place synonymous with good rest, as the French would tell you. And this is a place with a little bit of twist when it comes to what you get here in terms of your Sauvignon Blanc, your Shiraz, and different types of wines. And that's because this place is owned by a black man, Paul Siguqa. Come with me.
I grew up on a farm that's about 17 kilometers down this main road here in Franschhoek, called Becksburg. My mother was a farm laborer on that farm. We had a very beautiful upbringing, whereby I always say that we could tell the seasons by the vineyards, because our houses were surrounded by vineyards, and activities around the vineyards told you what season it is. Harvest time was always in summer, February, March, January, February, March. In winter, the vines go dormant, they go to sleep. In spring, you would see how life grows back onto the vines after a long wet and cold winter. So this has always been home, and a very happy childhood, even though we were very poor, because everybody on the farms are poor. So you don't even know that you are poor. But that's my upbringing on the winelands.
Siguqa has always had an entrepreneurial bone in him, such that when he hired 4 people to sell fruits and vegetables for him, his journey was told in a grade 8 curriculum, complete with an article of how the 17-year-old managed to buy a cell phone in 1997. But his childhood of growing up as farm workers with his entire family revokes tough memories.
The sad reality about life for children of farm laborers is that from a very young age, you almost conditioned to know that you'll be the next crop of labor. Intergenerational labor is something that we grew up with, where on a farm you would find that you have 3, 4, even 5 generations of farm laborers. In fact, we always used to joke that when a child is born at the cottages of the farm laborers, the farm owners would say +1 for the future. But my mother was very clear that none of her kids would be farm laborers. I have the utmost respect for farm laborers because I grew up amongst them. My mother was a farm laborer. But it is not right that a certain section of the population, their destiny is predetermined. That if you are a child of a farm laborer, you're going to be a farm laborer. My mother said that that stops with her, and that her children will be as far away from these farms. In fact, she was very clear that the only way we change that narrative is through education. I always wanted to be a businessman. I guess from a very young age, I was entrepreneurial. To raise money to go to school, because farm laborers used to get very low wages. I started various businesses, and some of them were very successful. Many of my school teachers in high school, still today I am in touch with many of them, were a great support structure. But they all say that I was never academic because I was always busy selling something outside the classroom. I was always busy producing something or reselling a product. In fact, my first business was in juice manufacturing with a few friends. I then went on to sell fruits. The fruit business was the most successful. And in fact, it's the one that I enjoyed the most, because I realized that with the wage my mother was getting, there was no way that I would be able to go to university. I also knew that we wouldn't even be able to afford the registration fees. And a few years before my matric, I was selling fruits, and I had a good few staff members that would sell while I was in school. And these were grown men and women that I provided jobs for while I was in the classroom. And I enjoyed that business thoroughly. But when I went to study, I was fortunate enough to also get bursaries that helped me finish my studies.
So we left the name at Kleingoederust, but how did we bring in our own identity into it?
After completing his studies at Stellenbosch University and media studies at Cape Peninsula, Siguqa says he saved as much money as he could towards his dream of becoming a wine baron.
I started in advertising sales in magazines. I then moved over to newspapers. And what an exciting time that was, because I got to move from the Western Cape and work in Gauteng. And from Gauteng, I worked in other parts of Africa, involved in the advertising sales environment. And that was a beautiful time of my life. But I also realized that I would have to exit the corporate life to achieve my dream, that was to establish a wine farm or buy a wine farm. And that dream or vision of owning one started when I was 17 years old, working at the farm where my mother used to work. I worked as a wine ambassador. And that moved me from hating the wine industry to actually loving it. That window of working in the tasting room as a wine ambassador.
It wasn't until the first crop of black people started visiting the wine farms that his view of the wine route changed. Among the first visitors to the wine farm where Siguqa worked as a wine ambassador was Miriam Makeba, and that visit in 1996 changed his life.
I hated everything about it. Let's start with the first fact was that all the black people were labor in all the farms, so to say. There were no black winemakers, even though we knew that there are people that have the skill and the experience. So it seemed to me that it didn't matter how smart you are, how ambitious you are, how hardworking you are. If you are black, you're going to be labor. Your children will be labor, and their children will be labor. Second one is the legacy of the DOP system. And it's something that wine farm owners nowadays shy away from. It's something that we talk about in hushed tones. But the fact of the matter is that it's a reality that is still affecting a lot of the communities. But when I started working in the tasting room, my whole perspective changed. Because in 1996, I started seeing black people coming to the tasting room. You know, people were dressed nicely. They were happy when they drank. Wine didn't cause any chaos. And then there were the stories about the vines, the terroir, which speaks to the soils, the different cultivars, the blending methods. I was totally taken with the concept of winemaking and enjoying wine. And from that day, I knew that one day I would have to save and buy myself a small farm where I could make wine. It took 15 years of saving after I started working, but after 15 years I saved enough money to buy this little piece of beautiful land here in Franschhoek.
His journey into wine farm ownership would not have been possible without Rodney Zimba, a childhood friend and an expert winemaker whose experience is widely sought on the wine route.
But we knew that if you have a wine farm, you need to have wine. We started in 2015 or 16, end of 15, beginning of 16, buying in grapes to make wines so that by the time we acquire the farm, we would have wines that are ready for market. Now, our philosophy is quality, quality, quality. We do not compromise on that. And we knew that we would need at least 3 years for our wines to have aged before we release them in the market.
Siguqa faced some obstacles in his search for the perfect wine farm, And even after he had found one, it had seen better days.
The biggest barrier to black people participating in the wine industry is access to land and access to capital. Now, Franschhoek has some of the most expensive agricultural land. Here you pay about 1.2, 1.5 million rand for a hectare. Now that's expensive. We bought what was basically dilapidated farm. The vines had disease. These buildings look nothing like they are now. And the farm had been in the market for 8 years and nobody would buy it. We, however, saw the potential, also the location of the farm. Eventually in 2019, we were able to purchase it. And Rodney's philosophy is that good wine are made on the vineyards before you get to the cellar. So we had to remove all the old vines. At some stage it looked like a sand field. We needed to do soil correction on many parts of the land. We needed to plant new vines, but also build and get a new irrigation system, a big investment. And then we moved on to the buildings. Even though we bought the farm in 2019, we could only bring in our first visitors in 2022, at the end of 2022. Strangely enough, my mother was one of the first people I brought to the farm. And she said, "IniSixhosa ngamadlagadlaga la." And she said that once you start, you can't give up. And you're going to have to make this thing work, because the future black farmers would want to see an example of a farm that worked.
In the second half of this interview, Paul Siguqa speaks about his dreams and aspirations for Kleingoederust, a place which has a lot of meaning for him, and his dream of building intergenerational wealth. In this next segment, Paul Siguqa speaks about what is important to him as far as the future of Kleingoederust is concerned, and what that trip to China at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation meant for his brand. Take a listen.
I think it's game-changing. Maybe I'm being modest when I say that a few couple of crates, we're talking a few containers per annum. Now, we are a boutique small producer, but our projection with what we are putting together with the Chinese is that in year one, 20% of everything that we produce will be going to China. And that's huge. For us, it's a game changer, and it sets us on a path to profitability because this is a very capital-intensive business, but also we went into it knowing that it's a generational kind of business. We're trying to create intergenerational wealth, and we are not looking for a quick buck, but going into China is a game changer.
Siguqa has ambitious plans for growing into other markets, but still focusing on not losing the quality of his brand in an industry known for its exclusivity.
Our business plans are very much compact, and in the next 5 years, we would want Kleingoederust to be in the top 3 wine estates in South Africa. Now, that's a big feat if you think about the fact that we are first-generation farmers. We don't want to stay emerging farmers. We want to be commercial. We want a seat at the big table. And I believe that we are well on track with that. looking at the accolades the awards that we've won in the short space, and the kind of place that we've created. We are soon building accommodation. We also building a production cellar right here, where we would own the means of production. That brings down your cost of manufacturing your product, that brings down the cost of storage, but most importantly, that gives you full control of your product in terms of quality management. And we are grateful for all the support we've gotten thus far.
His mother was a great inspiration into every aspect of the farm, including Kleingoederust's signature Noma Roma, which is named after the late matriarch who lost her battle with cancer in November.
Our first batch of MCC, the Noma Roma, sold out in 60 days, every bottle of it. And that was a surprise. But upon reflection, the story of Noma Roma is not unique to us. The story of mothers, it speaks to celebrating mothers. It speaks to celebrating farm laborers. It speaks to supporting the underdog. And that for us was mind-blowing, the reception that we got of just the outpouring of support and love.
On any given day, Kleingoederust is teeming with foreign and local visitors, some of whom spend the entire day in the tranquility of the estate. On his first day off from work since a grueling election campaign, Western Cape Cultural Affairs and Sport MEC Ricardo Mackenzie had Kleingoederust in mind.
After the hectic year of elections, I decided to take a few days off, and I thought, what a wonderful time to relax. I decided to come here to Kleingoederust. Wonderful lunch, roasted cook of South Africa's favorite dish, one of our many favorite dishes, and a lovely lamb on the spit, wonderful fresh lamb with some mint. And I decided, just take a drive out to Franschhoek. And it's wonderful. It's that time of the year. So please, everyone, if you're looking for a place just to do like me, come and relax, buy some stuff for the family, have a lamb on the spit, and of course, if you're into it, have some wonderful wines as well.
Siguqa is a big proponent of supporting entrepreneurship as he continues to support small businesses through his farm.
The narrative has always been that where government gets involved and people are granted farms, in no time that farm will be in ruins. We've read about how people were selling the roof sheets, how people would sell the tractors and the farm implements in no time. So we were determined to say that we're going to make this farm work. We're going to put on the work, we're going to put in the skills, but most importantly, we had to make sure that we succeed. And yes, there were times when you're not sure how you're going to do your next salary run. But you keep going and you make it work. What saved us is the use of local skills and local labor. None of the work was done by any of the big construction companies. We went directly into the township here behind us. We would find Bapa, who is the best guy for paving, and would give him a direct contract. Who's the best builder, and give him or her a direct contract. Our landscaping, we were deliberate that we're going to give locals the work, but also to give them kind of a CV to say that they have done the planting of the poles in the vines. When they go for bigger contracts, they can bring the potential client and say, come see my work at Kleingoederust, and that has worked very well for us.
While many of his friends and family members tried to convince him to put his name on the farm and the wine, Siguqa's business acumen kicked in to keep the name, which is more than 100 years old.
It was important for us to, number one, keep the name. A lot of people have asked me that, why would you keep the name being in Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor? That in fact the name of the farm should change to reflect who we are and to reflect the new era that we are in. And that's a valid argument, but we decided against it. We decided against it for two reasons. When colonizers got to a space, they would remove the names and identity. If we did that, how different would we have been? Also, there is a lot of history. In 1905, I'm sure this building and all the other buildings were built by black hands. We needed to celebrate the history, or at least acknowledge the history that was here before we got here. Hence, we kept the name. Then there is a commercial decision. Apartheid did a hard one on us as black people. Those peacetime revolutionaries who are my friends that said, change the name. I asked many of them, how many times have you gone to a spa and looked for a wine with a black name? And the answer is always, never.
His passion for the wine industry knows no bounds.
We opened our doors just as COVID was about to end, and we never looked back ever since. But what stood out for me was the quality of the wine and how people said this place made them feel. Our restaurant, we decided to do South African food. We do a lamb on spit, Cape Malay style curried fish, rooster brood or irostile as we know it. We braai. It's a whole feast down there in the restaurant. It's a South African feast. Many of the farms do Italian, French, Western foods. We said we're going to do an African feast where you feel like you're visiting family. Authentic, honest food and beautiful wines. So if you do not come here for supporting another black person, you come for the food and the wine. It's absolutely great.
Word of mouth has been a major boost to Kleingoederust and its workers.
Sometimes you ask the guest that arrives here at the farm, who sent you to this farm? They would say, no, the lady that cleans my room said I need to go to Kleingoederust. Or the security guard at the gate told me I need to go to Kleingoederust. They don't know even me and Paul, but they know there's people of color that has Kleingoederust here. That for me is big.
Sure, I must say people receiving us here in Franschhoek has been amazing. At first, we were nervous because just to the fact that, we are starting off with the story, children without identity. Coming to this place, nobody knew who we were. But when we got here, so everybody, because it's a story about children of farm workers, so there's a lot of people here in Franschhoek, they could relate to our story, and immediately they welcome us into this valley. I must say the welcoming was amazing. Up to now, people will recommend people to come here. Every second person that comes to the farm would, the guy at the fuel station told me to come here. The place where we sleep at, say we must come to Kleingoederust, this is the place. So we've really been blessed by that. Well received.
When it comes to the number one lesson that you have learned that you would like to share to people out there who want to realize their dreams as well?
I think for entrepreneurs, I would say the first thing or the most important thing is to get started. There are a lot of people with great ideas and they want to perfect the idea, they want to perfect the plan, they want to perfect the business plan. no business plan is perfect until it is implemented. So I would say to entrepreneurs, just start. And then after you've started, you need to persevere. You need to have that tunnel vision where you are not distracted by the noises and the obstacles that come your way. You just keep going, and you are going to have success if you are focused on the end goal.
Paul, thank you so much for your time. Paul Siguqa is the owner now of Kleingoederust wine farm. 1905 it was founded, and he is, if not the only, one of a very few black people in this part of the country, in Franschhoek, who are actually creating their own experience in their own farm when it comes to Kleingoederust here in Franschhoek. For Newzroom Afrika on channel 405, I am Xolani Mbanjwa in Franschhoek in the Western Cape.